Hello, welcome to the New Stack Makers, a podcast where we talk about at-scale application development, deployment, and management. Hey, we'd like to thank Cloud Foundry for sponsoring our podcast from the Cloud Foundry Summit in Santa Clara, California. It's been a great conference. We've learned a lot about the new open service broker API developments, Kubo, and just generally how enterprise customers are using Cloud Foundry these days. Check out Cloud Foundry at cloudfoundry.org and check out the podcast. We have several coming up. Hey, it's Alex Williams, the New Stack. I'm here with Opal Perry of Allstate at the Cloud Foundry Summit in Santa Clara. Hey, Opal, how are you?
Hey, I'm great. It's great to be here with you.
You spent some time in the Air Force, as I see in your bio.
That's right, 6 years active duty.
Right. So how does that train you for, the world that you're in right now?
I really took a lot from my time in the Air Force about how to work in teams and how to let teams be independent in accomplishing their mission, but coordinated in accomplishing the larger mission. I think that translates right through to a lot of what we need to do, particularly in enterprise software today, where we need to have independent units, but they all need to work in service of our customer.
So how do you think about that in terms of Cloud Foundry, and the path to microservices that I'm sure you guys are exploring and really embarking upon?
Yes, microservices right now, that's a very important part of our strategy. Cloud Foundry has been a really important enabler for us for a couple of different reasons. We're very excited about the capabilities of achieving more elasticity as we deliver more digital capability for our 16 million households we serve at Allstate. We really want to make sure we can have the scaling and serve them in all of their needs. And that's been a really important part of the cloud approach. From a microservices standpoint, we have a core claims system that was built not all that long ago. And I remember when I first came to Allstate almost 6 years ago, our chief architect at the time said to me, that'll be the last monolith we ever build. What I'm not sure he or I anticipated at that time is how much progress we would have made by now at starting to dismantle that monolith. So we've been decoupling our larger core system to facilitate many of the changes we need to make, and started working with kind of smaller product and service teams to build the new components that we can then orchestrate for our end-to-end customer experience.
So the last monolith you'd ever build, it almost sounds like, I was talking to someone last week about the last software company, but now we're talking about the last monolith, which I think there's some corollary there. And now you're building out this, this new distributed system, really, that's you're decomposing it in many ways, taking it down. It seems like taking apart like a huge factory almost, right? Where moving parts of the factory to to different locations and splitting it up into different teams. It has to have some. I'm curious on the organizational structure you've had to put in place just to achieve that.
Yes, we talk a lot about right now moving from a project-focused organization to a product-focused organization, and I kind of use that organizationally, product interchangeable with the services work to develop it. So having smaller teams co-located as part of our network. We are a multi-location as a large enterprise. We've got teams in different places, but we've been working on defining ownership of our products and services for each individual team and empowering them to be self-directed in building what needs to. And kind of just like I said in my opening comments, though, we need to integrate back up and make it part of the whole. All of it's really in service to the business. So I think your factory analogy was interesting. What it's really about is making the factory a lot more reconfigurable dynamically for where the business wants to go. So I think there was a time and a place when people would build things and feel confident the process would be very static for many years to come. And now we know, given our industry, given what's happening across industries, we want to be able to reconfigure to best suit the customer needs in a more dynamic environment.
So those older monoliths really, they did not embrace continuous delivery. they did not really embrace continuous integration. How have you made that transition to continuous integration, continuous delivery, as you've been taking apart this monolith?
We started with some of our teams that really took the initiative, that understood the benefits and the potential, and really just worked on the own parts of their code as they would be working towards a product release, starting to implement things, and then sharing that across the teams so that people saw the benefits, whether it was faster deployment time, earlier detection of bugs, just taking a lot of the repetitive, undifferentiated work out of the loop by automating it. And then really sharing those early results, or bright spots as we call them, across the teams. And then about 6 months after that, we started implementing really across the enterprise, but a good focus in claims on implementing tools and pipeline and system, and really prioritizing. And we've seen tremendous, again, results now when we get into production deployments happening a lot more quickly, and again, being able to detect and fix issues a lot earlier before they're actually impacting a production user or customer.
Okay, so when you talk about these, what CI environments are you using, in your own group? What are the continuous deployment practices, platforms that you're using?
We have quite a variety, just depending on what technology is being used on a particular application. To me, it's a lot more important just the principles that the teams are learning. I say that again, we don't want 100 different tools, but people find what's appropriate. Are they working in Java? Are they working in .NET? Where are they deploying? What's appropriate? Starting to build out their pipeline, making sure we can monitor that. So we've got a host of different tools within the enterprise, but to me, the real lift is the mindset shift for teams about thinking about just that frequent build, frequent deployment, at least before production, to testing things out.
What are then the deployment patterns that you're starting to see? For instance, with your continuous integration and continuous delivery environments.
We've made a lot of progress, like I said, in just collapsing the time we need to take. That's so critical for our businesses, where as customers start to have more of a 24/7 appetite, right? If you're out on the road and something happens and you need Allstate to respond and deal with it, you don't want to get hit by somebody telling you all our systems are down now. We've got great people in front of the claims process, but just collapsing deployment times, and now we're starting to move towards plans in 2018 infrastructure-wise to be able to do blue-green deployment and manage more continuous 24/7 availability, which again isn't something that the prior era of business process demanded, but it's a great opportunity for us now.
How are those deployment times changing then?
In terms of just the scale?
Yeah, like you're saying, if I'm out on a rainy road in the middle of the night, I don't want Allstate to be down, right?
That's right, yeah. So we're really, I'll give you one good example of an application that the internal staff uses to help schedule and make sure we've got people present to support customers when they need us. And prior, we were taking a 3 to 4 hour outage to get the deployment and the validation done. And now on our last cycle, we're down to 40 minutes. So I'm seeing a good return with a lot more possibility. And again, that's still with a system that's not fully decoupled yet.
Now, so that's 3 to 4 hours to 40 minutes for a down system, right?
That's right.
And so how is this transformation to microservices and these moving off a monolithic? How have you been able to do that? How have you been able to reduce that time?
So I think there's a couple dimensions of the time to reduce. There's, like I said, just with the way we build and deploy, there's reducing the time when we're ready to get something out into the environment. But the bigger gain really is in collapsing our cycle time for introducing new features into the environment. And we've, again, done that in a variety of ways, a real emphasis on lean and agile methods. But I have a team today that started yesterday working on a new concept. And when I get back into the office in 2 weeks' time, they're going to be able to show me some working code that's something that in a previous era we would still be probably negotiating all the requests and getting people to start to provision servers versus being able to actually put all this together and demo to a group of business and tech execs working code.
Sure. So really that's been that, it's that release factor. How's that affected your operations teams, this change?
We have a lot of talk about that. I think we're in one stage of change now, and I expect to see it continue to change as we move forward. We have been around a service management approach where we have incident and problem managers. Certainly a good part of the operations is where we see improved availability, reduced downtime, impacts there. But when it comes to the team actually managing and monitoring the operations, we have a balance between centralized groups on the team and then within the product areas and teams, their responsibility to be available and respond and know their system's healthy at any given time. One progression I really like is starting to see the teams just build in from the get-go more active monitoring, more meaningful messaging that helps us pinpoint who to page out when we need something versus a little more traditional, let's get everybody on a call and figure it out together.
It gets complicated though, doesn't it? Because the time is starts to have a lot of different dimensions. I mean, because there may be a message you might send, right? But these worlds are so much more increasingly asynchronous that the actual kind of way you measure kind of the changes does not always fit the pattern the way you used to do it before, right?
Yes.
So it's not just one application. Usually now you have multiple applications.
That is
and you may have multiple different time dimensions across the different applications.
Yes, and I think that's one of the biggest conceptual leaps related to taking a more service-driven approach is, it's easier theoretically on paper to understand how it should all work and how you coordinate changes in Handshake. It's another challenge to live into doing that and doing that flawlessly in the face of the customer.
It requires a lot more automation. I mean, you have to think about, for example, we've been hearing stories about how you have to think about API management, right? And how you think about API management. But now, if you're having these lags, right, and you have it internally, now you're starting to see people talk about different ways that the machines can communicate, not necessarily through the REST-based API.
Yes, and it's part of what's so exciting working in the environment, though, right?
Yeah.
I think is that it requires a lot more critical thinking to really understand what you're doing, understanding the impact it has both from a systems flow perspective and also from a data lineage perspective, right? Do I know what's happening to the data I create or touch as it flows along the whole experience? That you're right, some things are more instantaneous and some things will persist for a while in the environment, and that is the real again, intellectual shift. I think it's easier to operate in one whole system the old way or one whole system the new way. It's coming through the middle and really having the right leadership and the approach and the steady hand to build into the new that takes a lot of work.
So what will be some of the processes that do change? What will be something you're talking about? You're in one stage now, and you've been, and now you're looking at some, the changes that are to come. Like, what are some of the processes and changes that will have to come as you kind of continue building out your microservices infrastructure?
I think getting our changes to be more atomic is a big one that we still have an opportunity for. Again, we've started breaking things down, but we still are more coarse-grained. So being able to really get so that we can do that, and then we've got a really strong agenda around our monitoring and management of the system, so that we know from a heartbeat or however perspective that you detect there might be an issue, we can detect it early and roll things back. I think really getting that as a fluid discipline in production is a big step.
Now on both those matters, getting your changes to be more atomic. What does that mean to you? What does that particularly mean to you and the company when you're saying that?
So, if I think about the eras we progressed through, And this isn't just a particular thing to Allstate, I'd say. It's to many large enterprises I've seen. As we had a stage of kind of growing up where things were more independently controlled, but they became very chaotic and there were a lot of collisions. And then we went through the era where the way to tame that was through enterprise release framework. I've been at a number of companies and we had different variations of that, right? But it was basically like planned and synchronized change windows,
right,
and ordering a lot of discipline beforehand to try to guarantee we wouldn't do any harm when we went in. And pretty effective, but a lot of energy and a lot of brute force and
right,
not a lot of ability to respond to late breaking changes. So to me, the more we're able to go back to smaller unit changes that we know can be validated and rolled back when we need to.
So with that kind of in mind then, talking about monitoring and management, right? You want to be able to detect things early, correct? But the traditional monitoring environments have been application-based, not as much component-based, nor have they been really about distributed environments, or multi-cloud, so to speak, right? How are you, so what kind of monitoring and management environments are you looking at to help kind of accommodate these very modern new problems that are faced?
I think it is a multifaceted solution. We've done a lot with Splunk over the last year, and really getting things more tightly instrumented there. And it's, again, part of understanding the tempo at which we're operating as the enterprise becomes more digital and the number of transactions that you do in a day, an hour, a minute increases. The intervals with which people used to think about doing a health check, like a 15-minute interval, used to work well enough at the volumes that we were on, but nowadays you're thinking that the amount of business or dollars that can flow through something in a very short amount of time, we really need to have that constant vigilance.
Where does Cloud Foundry fit in all this then? Where kind of in in this story?
Yeah, it's great for us in a number of different ways. I mean, I think one thing is by letting my developers really focus on the business problem at hand, right? The kind of abstraction, if you will, of Cloud Foundry, that once they understand and learn about Cloud Foundry, being able to code to that and not having to worry so much. There was a lot of really traditional having to understand the infrastructure configuration and manage that. So instead, focusing a lot more on the customer and the user-facing capabilities, and then also just what we've been able to build in terms of the resilience so far initially internally in our own on-prem environment, and in the future as we look out to the cloud, being able to have that resilience so that we're less susceptible to single point failures. Managing that operationally has been key as well.
Okay, so making it less susceptible. With that in mind, Cloud Foundry is used by how many developers do you have internally using it now?
We have a couple hundred now. I lose track sometimes when I'm out doing different things we just graduated a class we had of 21 new developers in Charlotte this week. We've been building up over the last 2+ years to the point where I think maybe we say we've got about 400 now that are using Cloud Foundry.
And that's for you're in the group, and you're in your divisional CIO for claims.
I am, but those numbers are for our enterprise. We work together as a technology team, okay. And then of that section, I probably now, between my teams in different locations, have, I think, about probably 50 of those people that are working.
Okay, so then Cloud Foundry is, you guys are using Cloud Foundry. Are you using other kind of infrastructure platforms such as Kubernetes?
We're not right now, no. Right. We've been working with Pivotal a lot, both Pivotal Labs to kind of jumpstart our methods and get into the cloud, and obviously Pivotal Cloud Foundry, which we've licensed to help us manage.
Right. Okay. So in terms of your, where you go from here, what are some of the, the coming challenges that you're going to be looking to tackle?
I think there's more and more telemetry all the time related to a claim or just the insurance business. So as we do more with using photos to determine claims, and we're thinking about those photos in transit and in storage, and what we do with video, what we do with all the other data and information, we need to make sure we can really operate at scale and make the smart decisions about what's important there. We're increasingly partnering with our analytics teams to be able to have them create models that give us better insight from the amazing amount of data we've got. So we're relying on more and more pieces of the system, where we used to rely on the information systems to pass a more limited set of information from what a human would observe with their eyeballs on damage on through.
So now you're getting that data in, how often are you getting that data now?
Every day from as many customers that want to use.
Really?
For example, if someone has an auto accident, you could use our quick photo claim, and you could take photographs from our mobile app and upload that. Instead of someone having to get their eyes on their vehicle, we can do many estimates looking at those photographs.
What's your data infrastructure for that kind of data then to so you can start looking at that data coherently?
Yeah, we've got a lot of initiatives going on. I have to kind of defer to some of my colleagues in that area. They're always bringing in some of the new. We've got both structured and unstructured.
That's where
data.
You can use cloud. Is Cloud Foundry then is it becoming how's that become then an effective platform for that?
We've been exploring that, but we aren't as mature on that area so far.
Well, the keynotes are starting, so I'm sure you want to go check those out.
Yeah.
So Opal, thank you very much for taking some time to talk with us. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to the summit.
Great, thanks.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. And our thanks to Cloud Foundry for sponsoring our podcast from the Cloud Foundry Summit in Santa Clara, California. Check out Cloud Foundry at cloudfoundry.org, and talk to you again soon. Listen to more episodes of the New Stack Makers at thenewstack.io/podcasts. Please rate and review us on iTunes, like us on YouTube, and follow us on SoundCloud. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.